Unless you've been taking a break from social media for the past few months, you'll be well aware of the recent changes and thinking in board design. One particular area for winging is the use of downwind style boards for light wind winging. This is a particular area of some accelerated board design, particularly in custom board designers who don't have to commit to a design for the year and can change and update their designs with every build. In this video, I take a look at a couple of boards from Swift Foiling, a custom wing foil board designer from the south coast of the UK. The questions I'll answer are: where do these boards fit for beginners and intermediates? Why would you buy one? And what can you expect to gain by having one of these in your board quiver? Or in short, do you need a downwind board? So let's take a look at the two boards and discuss the different design elements, as these are using two quite different design philosophies. The white board is a 6-foot 10-inch board, 20 inches in width and 90 litres of volume. The dark board is a 6-foot 3-inch board, 20 inches in width and again 90 litres of volume. The white board is probably the more traditional downwind style. It has beveled rails, a diamond tail and a more pronounced double concave at the front of the board. Being the same volume but longer than the darker board, it is thinner, so there is a little less thickness between the board deck and the foil mast. The darker board is a more rounded tail and has a more planing style hull, sharp rails and a flatter bottom and less pronounced double concave. Being shorter, it has a thicker section between the board deck and the foil mast. The foil boxes are roughly positioned the same. The white board has a more pointy nose and a more curved shape in profile. The darker board has a more rounded nose and tail and therefore more parallel sides to the board. So these two boards come from different design philosophies, the white board being the more pointed at both ends and going for a slippery, narrow shape that cuts through the water. The darker board has the flatter bottom and a more rounded nose and tail and plays off the planing hull type takeoff onto foil. Let's start out by talking about downwind boards from a beginner's point of view and look at the traditional route into wing foiling for a beginner. So the standard beginner advice goes something like this. Get a board that is 20 to 30 litres above your weight. Get a fairly large foil. Get a wing that is about 1 metre bigger than what the good foilers of the same size as you are using at your local spot in the conditions that you want to wing foil. The board that usually gets bought here is a big, wide, flat bottom board. It's also true to say that these are usually sourced second hand, as beginners are always ditching these boards for something smaller, usually about 10 litres above your weight, once they can foil. So this beginner board is seen as an interim measure, something to learn with and then move away from. An alternative route is not to buy this board at all. Learn at a wing foil school on school equipment and then just go straight to the board that is around 10 litres more than your weight. Let's look at this from a different perspective. I want to focus on two aspects here, the board and the wing. Beginner foils I don't think particularly change due to riding a downwind board. If we look at the board first, you could buy a downwind board that is 20 to 30 litres more than your current weight. That board will accelerate onto foil way faster than the big, wide, normal beginner board. It will also require much less pump technique of the wing, as they maintain so much speed when you pump them. Lastly, you can probably go with a wing the same size as the good foilers are using that are the same size as you and are on shortboards at your local spot. So what have you gained or lost as a result? Well, the downwind board will be a little more tippy on the roll axis, so that is a negative, and I would say that 20 inches wide is an absolute minimum for a beginner. You likely want a bit wider. If you've ridden boards before like a windsurfer, you probably would be fine on a 20-inch board. A total beginner, you may want to look at wider. Downwind boards are also a little more expensive than traditional boards, and therefore there is a negative in terms of the expense. However, you're not looking to sell this board, you're going to be keeping it, and therefore you aren't going to lose money having to sell it on. You probably also need less wings. You don't need the much bigger wings for light wind conditions, and you can get onto foil far easier as the board accelerates way faster and will gain speed even from a poor pumping technique. You also have a board that will be amazing in lighter conditions and extend the times you can actually go wing foiling rather than having to wait for much windier days like beginners normally have to. Downwind boards also track amazingly well off foil, and you can make great progress back to a beach without drifting downwind, so less walks of shame and much better upwind ability off the foil. And lastly, as already mentioned, you don't need to sell this board. You can keep it as your light wind weapon and just add a smaller board of your choice to your quiver when you are ready for it. And of course, lastly of all, with the addition of a paddle, you've actually got a board that you could downwind on, so you have a whole other sport that you could potentially take advantage of should you wish to. The case for the intermediate wing foiler is a little different, and it depends on whether you are running a 1 or 2 board quiver. Some intermediates go for the 1 board quiver, usually a board of the same volume as your weight. This serves as both the light and high wind board, and I myself ran this type of board for a year and it works pretty well. Then there are those with a 2 board quiver, which again consists often of a board that has the same displacement as your weight, but then there is also a smaller board somewhere in the 20 to 30 litres below the rider weight in terms of volume, and this is the high wind, waves and jumping board. For the 1 board quiver intermediate, I think the downwind board is a bit too much of a compromise, because you lose the shortboard feel to gain some light wind performance. You can't really jump a downwind board, and it's not really what you want to be on in high wind or waves. So here I don't think the downwind board really works. For the 2 board quiver, you just switch your largest board for the downwind board. In doing so, you gain a light wind weapon. In addition, you can ride smaller foils in light wind, so you don't need quite as big light wind foils because you can generate so much speed in light winds to get the smaller foil up and onto foil. You can also potentially get rid of your biggest wing, or at least reduce your biggest wing by 0.5 meters to 1 meter. You haven't compromised your high wind foiling, as you still have your shortboard for that. Additionally, on very light wind days, if you end up in a lull, instead of drifting downwind, you can just potter along off foil and just point the board at the beach and it will go there. If you get completely becalmed, they paddle way faster than a shortboard when laid on them. And last of all, depending on what volume of downwind board you go for, you potentially have access to a whole nother sport by buying a paddle and getting into downwinding. This is really the sum of my thoughts on whether a downwind board will or won't suit the different types of foiler. I know at my own beach, several of the more active foilers have either already switched their larger board to a downwind board, or are looking at moving away from the 1 board quiver to 2 boards, a downwind board and a shortboard. The ability to ride smaller foils and smaller wings in lighter winds is an attractive proposition, and the much reduced likelihood of a walk of shame due to drifting downwind when the wind drops is a powerful incentive to make a change. So let's talk about the 2 swift foiling boards and what we found out riding these 2 different designs. First, for light wind, length matters, but not too much of it for wing foiling. There are much larger downwind boards in the 7 to 8 foot range, and these don't work so well if your primary focus is wing foiling. I was warned away from this by swift foiling themselves, as not the direction to go if your primary goal is light wind winging. So 7 foot and below, and it was clear that the longer 6 foot 10 board was better at getting onto foil than the 6 foot 3 board. It wasn't a huge margin, but it was there nonetheless. Similarly, tracking off foil was better on the longer board. In choppy water, the beveled rails on the longer board were better at handling the chop and provided a less tippy and more comfortable ride when sloshing off foil in nasty close period bumps. On the foil, the 6'3" board had the advantage. As always, less length is better on the foil, and this continued to be true with the downwind boards. It was just noticeable that the 6'3" board was a slightly easier board to manage. Less length, a little less swing weight, and just a bit nicer to use on the foil. For me, overall, as a light wind board, I preferred the longer white board, but this is very much a personal preference of what you value the most. I wanted ease of getting onto foil and ease of dealing with lulls and choppy water when the wind dropped. I have a short board for when it gets windier, so a little extra swing weight was fine for me on my light wind board. I would absolutely recommend trying before you buy. I was worried that 20 inches wide would be too short and tippy, and this turned out not to be the case at all, at least for winging. I may feel very differently stood on the board with a paddle trying to balance with no wing for a counterbalance. So I hope the information in this video was useful. I hope you liked looking at the different two designs that we had to play around with. And the last thing I'm going to do here is just give you a little look at the Swift Foiling website. They make fantastic boards, and I highly recommend giving them a visit if you can and having a look at their product range, because they really do make excellent boards. So this is a quick look at the Swift Foiling website, and Swift Foiling are the board designer. They do various different types of boards, and I'm just going to give a little look here through their website. They have 3D views that you can look at for the boards, and some details of their NG board, which is what you normally see me riding in my videos, my blue board and also my orange board. Blue one is an 80 litre NG and the orange one is a 60 litre NG, and you can see their pricing here. And you can have them make it, they're made to order generally. They do have some boards in stock, but most boards are made to order. This is Dom, who's one of the partners in Swift Foiling. Important thing here is they're made ultra durable with carbon and Negra and epoxy, so they're not a painted board, it's a super hard polished epoxy. There's no painting of the boards as such, so you can't scratch the paint off, so they always look really nice, the Swift boards, because they are effectively just a polished epoxy over the carbon and Negra. Super tough, super durable. You can pick your own colour schemes and design how you want your board to be. They fit the indestructible foil box, which is a certain type of foil box. You can have foot straps put in, you can have whatever layout you want. You can also have this surf deck added as well as an extra option. If you just go back up to the top here, you can see, let's go to the boards. You've got the NG board, which is kind of flat at the back for a fast takeoff, and you've got the Easy board, which is a more traditional board design with like a cutaway at the back, a stepped cutaway at the back of the board, not so flat, some bevel to the rails. And then they have the downwind boards, which is what I'm playing around with in this particular video. And then they also do prone boards as well, and you can talk directly to the designers, and you can effectively take any of their designs and customize it and change it to be exactly how you want it to be. Now, in terms of where they are, this is Swift Foiling, so this is the UK. This is Swift Foiling here on the south coast, and if I just zoom in here, you'll see that this is Hailing Island here. And you may have seen videos from here from various people, Tom Court, Sam Light. They do videos from Hailing Island, surf videos and kite surfing videos, very often filmed here. And Swift Foiling is just on one of the industrial estates on Hailing Island. Okay, so that's it for this video. Please give us a like and subscribe if you can, and we'll see you on the next video.